Today, I'd like to introduce Nao Yukawa. He is the CEO at DeMind Incorporated. They're building Lifestack, the first calendar app with energy in mind. Lifestack uses health data from wearables and smartphones to help you optimize your calendar for energy and productivity. Thus far, they've raised over 500,000 from VC and angel investors. Prior to Lifestack, Now spent time as an interviewer with Neurotech JP, a student researcher at Arya Incorporated, a deep learning and software engineer at AlgoAge, and a writer in the domain of AI, as well as a globalization office tutor at the University of Tokyo. He received a Bachelor of Engineering in Artificial Intelligence from the University of Tokyo and a certificate in International Business from San Francisco State University. And so I gave a brief introduction there, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your story. I'd love to hear about your background and your journey to get to where you are today.
Yeah, sounds good. Again, I'm Nao. I'm originally from Tokyo, Japan, and I was born and raised there. And then I moved to San Francisco about 3 years ago while I was a student at the University of Tokyo. So it was during pandemic. So I was like able to take classes online. And in San Francisco, I went to a local school as well, San Francisco State. So at one time I was going to the two universities at the same time. And then somehow I managed that. And then after I completed both universities back in 2022, I started my current company, DeMind Incorporated. And so it's been 2 years since I started the company. And for the first 1 year, we were working on something totally different, like meditation and crypto. The mixture of meditation and crypto, it's in one liner, it was a meditate to earn. And then we raised some money from angel investors in a VC fund for that project. But we decided to pivot last summer. And then like about 6, 7 months ago, we started working on our current product, Lifestack. And we for the past couple of months, we had like closed beta testing with a limited number of users. But then just about 4 weeks ago, we launched publicly on product. So yeah, that's me.
Well, that's awesome. It sounds like it's been a really interesting journey thus far, and definitely really an exciting time to have, just recently did more of a public launch, and that's awesome to hear. Another quick question about your journey is what sparks that initial interest for you in the domain of neurotechnology or wearables?
Right. I guess my interest in neurotechnology started back when I was a university student, and I was always interested in what other people think, like what they have in their mind. And then also I was interested in taking advantage of my physiology to to become better at anything. So I always have this belief that physiology or your brain is the center of everything, right? Even if your environment is great, even if you have let's say rich parents, if your mind doesn't feel happy, then you're not happy. And it could be vice versa. So yeah, so those two reasons are the biggest reason that I got interested in neurotech, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. As you mentioned, the brain really is kind of the base of everything, the center of it all, and that's kind of what drew my interests towards that domain as well. And then something that you said about wearables really sparked my interest, how you are really wanting to take advantage of your physiology and kind of use that to optimize things. And it's really exciting what your company is working to do in that space. I think nowadays a lot of us have wearables and their electrodes are put into lots of different types of devices or watches, but we have all this data, and it's exciting now that your company and others like it are really taking this data and allowing us to really take that next step and do things with it rather than just collecting it and looking at it. We're using it to optimize other things. I was doing some research for this episode beforehand, and I watched your pitch on YouTube with Jason Calacanis. And so I was wondering if you could walk us through the experience of pitching a famous investor basically on live stream, and then also, what was going through your mind, and did you find the feedback from that pitch helpful?
Right, right. So before that, if your audience doesn't know who Jason Calacanis is, he's one of the most famous angel investors in Silicon Valley. who was one of the earliest investors in Uber. And he also runs this very famous podcast show called All In Podcast. And we got into his pre-accelerator program called Founder University. They take like 200 companies per each cohort, and we were one of them. And their program was like 3 months. Yeah, it was like 3 month program. And then pretty much all they did was like they just gave us some like resources about startups, like how to find your customers, how to talk to customers, how to build product. And then like after 3 month period, out of 200 companies, 20 companies get picked up. And then these 20 companies get to talk to I mean like get to pitch to Jason Calacanis himself. And then I mean I didn't know what the criteria was, but somehow we got selected as one of those 20 companies. And we pitched to Jason in this YouTube live stream. So yeah, that was actually cool. And the feedback, there's two big components from the feedback that we got from Jason Calacanis. The first one was because since there's so many calendar apps on the market right now, when people see a new calendar app, they go, yikes. So that was interesting. And the other thing was since our product is more like a combination of productivity and health, and like we still haven't like narrowed down any like specific niche in this health category. Jason also invested in companies like Calm or Fitbit. Like those companies have specific niche that they're targeting. So another feedback that we got from him was like you should consider targeting one specific niche rather than going broad in a health industry. So yeah, those were the two main feedback that we got from him.
And so something else you mentioned earlier in our conversation is that, back during COVID, you were studying at university and you ended up moving from Japan over to the US and basically going to school two places at once. And that seems like it was a very adventurous thing to do. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a bit about what inspired that decision and maybe what you learned from that, either about productivity or just, maybe some lessons learned just from that experience overall.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty actually random. Like, I just want, I always like to like shortcut, right? So like, I was not able to wait one more year and then like go back to Japan and then come back to the US. I didn't like that idea. So, I mean, one of the biggest challenges was definitely the time zone difference. Like because I was in San Francisco, my classes from the University of Tokyo were like sometimes 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So like during the daytime, I, took classes from San Francisco State, and then during the nighttime, I took classes from the University of Tokyo. So like I had to, I don't know, sometimes like I only got to sleep for like 3, 4 hours per day. But in terms of like productivity, let me just think about it. I honestly like I didn't do anything special back then. I was just taking classes, like try to prioritize my sleep though. But yeah, I think that was the only thing that I did.
Yeah, that makes sense. It definitely seems like it could be a chaotic schedule to be able to juggle all that. You have some classes in the middle of the day and you have some classes in the middle of the night. And I'm definitely impressed that you were able to pull that off. And so you mentioned after you completed university, then you ended up founding DeMind. And so I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into detail about the founding story behind your company.
Right. So first of all, the reason that I came to the States was not to start my company. It was actually to find some internships at local neurotech companies. So it's a bit technical, but in the US, there's a lot of types of visas, right? I came here first as a student on student visa. And then during the student visa period, you're not allowed to work in the States. But after 9 months, like after completing this university, my visa status changed to something that's called OPT. And then during this OPT period, you get to work at local companies. So my original plan was to do internships during this period. But then right after this OPT period started, I talked to one of my closest friends about the original idea that I had. And then he got excited and then he talked this idea to a VC in Japan. And then that VC got excited, and then he brought in some designer, and then they started like creating some mock-up of this original idea. And like, so things have kind of started moving. So I was like, back then I had two options, like, making this into a company or like keep finding internships. And then I was like, probably like starting a company might be more interesting. So yeah, it was sort of random.
Yeah, it seems like it definitely really started to snowball there from idea
Yeah.
to mock-ups, and next thing you know, it was a company. But that seems like a really awesome founding story. And so you also mentioned that back in the early days of DeMind, the team was working on some other projects or some other sorts of products before pivoting to the Lifestack app that you're working on right now. And so I was wondering if you could just share a little bit more detail behind what some of those previous projects or products were, and then also some detail behind what really sparked that pivot into what you're currently working on.
Right. So the product that we were working on, it's called Mindland. So the basic idea is by giving crypto incentives, we wanted to help people make meditation into a habit. Like, if you practice meditation, you get crypto tokens. So that was the main idea of this product. But another idea behind this was to validate that the users are practicing meditation. We asked them to use consumer wearable devices like Muse. I forgot the other device, but yeah. So by by asking them to use consumer wearable devices, what we wanted to do was to collect a bunch of brainwave data, and then we wanted to see what we can do with a large data set of brainwaves, like how we can monetize this or anything. But after like running it for 1 year, I mean, we had 1,000, like 2,000 users. So it was not that bad, but we realized that current, brain, especially from consumer brain computer interfaces, we cannot get that valuable data. So we realized that it's not going to be a sustainable business. So we decided to pivot. And for the current product, we wanted to focus more on like widely adopted devices rather than consumer BCIs. So we decided to work on, smartwatches, smart rings, and then we brainstormed about what we can do with the data from these devices. And then, yeah, we came to Lifestack.
Yeah, thanks for walking us through the journey there and all the different things that you guys explored. And so that brings me to my next question. So you mentioned that, currently Lifestack is working with some of the more broadly available consumer devices, smart watches, smart rings, these sorts of things. And I was wondering, is there any plan or potential option in the future for Lifestack to start to incorporate neural signals as maybe like a next step in that app? For example, maybe via sleep wearables from the Muse or from via Neuroscience.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we've been discussing internally. So the thing is, to give you a little context, I've got two more co-founders. We were a team of three co-founders, and then we're all from this. We actually like met each other through a shared interest in neurotechnology. So we all have, these brainwave like neuro signals. So yeah, definitely like if we have a chance, we would like to incorporate those data into our app too. One thing that we're looking at is a linear EEG. We still are not sure if like devices like Muse will be I don't know, like we're still not sure if those devices will widely adopt it, but I mean, we can see that in-ear EEG is becoming more popular. So once we see that it, I don't know, like passes the value of that. Yeah. Once we can definitely see that that those devices pass that phase, then yeah, we would really love to incorporate that.
Yeah, that seems like it would be a cool feature. And yeah, I totally see what you're saying about the form factor of, where these signals are coming from, and how from where we sit right now, these in-ear EEG devices might be the best option to get through that valley of death the soonest, just because a lot of people are wearing devices in their ears already. So just sometimes adding some extra functionality and or electrodes to those could be a lot easier than convincing them to basically like adopt a whole new habit or a whole new product, for example. And so Lifestack, you mentioned, is kind of like a mashup of a lot of different things. It is a calendar app, but it's also for productivity, and it also takes wearables into account, and so has its feet in a lot of different domains or a lot of different industries. And I was wondering, who do you view as your key competitors or the key apps or products that you are competing with as your company works to build Lifestack?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, most obvious ones are definitely like calendar apps. Like, just like Jason pointed out, there's so many calendar apps. Um, but actually, what we're doing here is we're trying to fill the gap between productivity apps and health apps. So like, a lot of people are conscious about their health because they want to boost their productivity. But when it comes to existing productivity tools, almost none of them takes into account your physiology or your health. We are not trying to replace, so we're definitely not replacing like existing calendar apps. More like hopefully we're gonna be on top of them. Like it could be just, I don't know, like API integration or I don't know, SDK. It can be anything. But so I don't think we have that direct competitors in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's almost like your vision is, rather than competing with existing calendars out there, more so like integrating with them eventually or becoming a layer in that
Mm.
whole productivity planning stack. And so we touched on this a little bit already, but I was wondering, over the short term, what would you say is next for DeMind and Lifestack?
So we just launched a month ago, and then we are definitely seeing some like surge of new users. So I think hopefully like we're gonna keep growing this our user base for the next couple of months, and probably like by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we're gonna raise another round. So I think that's gonna be our short-term goals.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like there's some exciting times ahead. And then my follow-up question to that would be, from where you sit right now, and I know things can change over time and pivots happen and all these sorts of things, but from where you sit right now, what do you see as the long-term goals or the final form of DMind or Lifestack?
Yeah, so that's something exciting for us. So the reason why we started off as a calendar app, there's two reasons for that. So the first one is obviously, like I said, we didn't see any productivity tool that incorporated health aspect, so we wanted to solve that. The other aspect was, like I said, the three co-founders were all big fans of neurotechnology and wearable tech. So, I mean, I have three wearable devices on my wrist. One thing that current wearable devices lack is contextual data. So, like, for example, even if you see an increase in your heart rate, it might be because of a stressful meeting, or it could be just because of workout. But you can't, like, I mean, some data you can tell, but you cannot tell everything. So we wanted to fill that gap. And calendar, if you look at calendar actually has a lot of contextual data. So by combining calendar data, we wanted to see what kind of insights we can get. So, but like there's so many other types of contextual data like GPS, computer usage, or like even food intake. So in the long term, we would like to connect more contextual data. So it doesn't have to be a calendar app, but we would like to be a platform that understands everything about your inside and outside. Yeah, that's the long-term vision.
Well, I really love that vision, and as you mentioned, it's sort of aiming to fill a gap that is not really there right now. And so I'm wishing you guys the best of luck as you work towards achieving that vision, and I'll definitely be rooting for you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my next question is, you mentioned that you and your co-founders had a pretty deep interest in neurotech and wearables. As you're working on this company now, you're kind of working in that domain. And so I was wondering, do you have any advice for students or young professionals aiming to work in the neurotech or wearable domain. And perhaps this would be especially useful for either people looking for their first job or their first internship in the space, or even somebody who is looking to build a startup of their own, like you and your team have done.
Right. I mean, well, first of all, my major was not neuroscience. My major was engineering. So like I had to learn everything by myself. So like just read a lot of books. But another thing that was good for me was me and my co-founders, we used to run this online media platform about neurotechnology together. So through this platform, we actually talked to a bunch of neurotech experts, like neurotech startup founders, neurotech researchers, and then, obviously like we made connections with them. So that was really, really helpful. Like learning from, top runners and yeah, just learning from those people is really valuable. So yeah, if you have a chance, go talk to those people.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I would definitely echo that advice. And so, another thing that we were discussing earlier in this episode is your vision for DeMind and Lifestack over the long term. Let's zoom out a little bit and think about the neurotechnology and just wearable applications overall over the long term. Do you have any predictions for this domain or for this field over the next perhaps 20 years or so?
Well, like definitely there's I mean, obviously there's a lot more people wearing those devices. I hear that it's only one third of the US population that has at least one wearable device currently. But with more devices becoming available, with more data points becoming available, I think we're gonna see a lot more applications, a lot more people taking advantage of those data. So yeah, I think that's something that we're excited for. But one interesting thing is, currently we see a lot of device companies, hardware companies, but there's only a few software applications that use those biometric data and then super successful. Hopefully, like we're gonna be one of them in 20 years. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely hope to see you guys in the mix there. And I totally agree. Super exciting times ahead and lots of interesting data to be worked with. And so my next question is, do you have a book or media recommendation for our listeners? And it could be neuroscience or wearable related, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay, so from neuroscience and wait, actually I forgot the name of the book. What was the book that the like it was like this thick and then it started with K? Oh, Candle Neuroscience. What was
Okay.
it? Was it
Is,
the book?
is, is it like a textbook?
Yes,
Okay.
I think because like I said, I didn't major in neuroscience, so I had to learn everything by myself, and that book was very informative. Yeah, so I highly recommend it. And from startup points, I recommend the mom test. So the mom test is about like user interviews, like how to talk to users. And sometimes when you go talk to users, they just say nice things about your product. And then but what you really need is honest feedback from them, right? So this book gives you tips to get those honest feedback even from your mom, even the person who loves you the most. So that's a really good book.
Yeah, these both sound like really useful and interesting books. I did have a follow-up question on the mom test. Are the tips that they give mostly related to the way that you word your questions or the way that you ask your questions in order to start to dig out the truth from those answers?
Yeah, so like, the easy, like, the most obvious example would be like, instead of asking if they like your product or not, maybe like you want to go more into details or like more like something that's more tangible, like how many hours did you how many hours do you usually sleep, or you know what kind of things you care about, like about your health. I mean, like those, I don't know how to put it, but like personal, something that users can't lie.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Make it so specific that they can't just
Yeah,
be like a yeah, it was awesome type of answer.
yeah, exactly.
And so, as we move towards the conclusion of the episode, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention or bring up?
Oh, okay. There's actually one. So our current app is a mobile app and like both on Android and iOS. And then we also provide a Chrome extension as well. But we're like these days we've been cooking a web app too. So once we like finish building the web app, we're gonna launch on Product Hunt again. So yeah, hopefully like people like your listeners will upcode.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lots of different modalities to choose from, and I'll be sure to link to whatever's available at the time of publishing, and hopefully the listeners will get a chance to kind of check it out on Product Hunt and give it an upvote and all these sorts of things.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Should our listeners contact you for further discussion after the episode? And if so, who should reach out to you? How should they reach out to you? Where maybe? And then what topics would you want to be reached out to about?
I'm pretty much available on Twitter or LinkedIn. Just look up Nao Yukawa, and I think I'll be the top. And yeah, just talk to me about anything. I'm pretty free.